Anchor is the best way to make a podcast. This is Josephine Electric, the lead singer of Family Electric Ghost. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Creation tools allow you to record your podcast so it sounds great. So distribute your podcast so you can be heard everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many, many more. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Now, you should go right now and download the Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started. This again is Josephine Electric, and Anchor FM is the best way to do your podcast. Hope you join us out there in the podcast blogosphere, and we look forward to listening to your cool tunes and tones.
This is Family Electric Ghost, and we are live with the Vibrant Shadows, the alternative pop duo from Shawnee, Oklahoma. And we've been a podcaster since 2018. We've had about 60 guests from international bands all over the world, and we're glad to welcome the Vibrant Shadows to the program. So we're going to talk to you guys, but we've got your YouTube video and for your latest single. And what we like to do with the podcast is we like to show people, the artists that we're talking about. On the previous podcast, when we were audio, we couldn't actually, have people look at or listen to the music. So we're going to play your new YouTube video, and we're going to cue it up. We've got it set up for Trapped. So if that's cool, we'll talk to you on the backside of it. Okay?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go on mute, and then we'll get back into it after. Okay, so maybe a second. I'd have to do something. You have to turn off my green screen because it messes up the video. Okay, so we're going to get into your new song. It's for Trapped. That's your official video, right? From YouTube?
Official lyric video, yeah.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to get into it now.
I'm trapped in faded bread. The hands stick by, move toward my death is dread. Course dangerously prepared to strike at any lead but fate. May see me gain my strength. Fight so hard. Started veins are pounding hard. So stay. Spinning out my self-contained. Trapped in rain. Gone in a flash, so trapped in so contained. Spinning out my self-contained. Stone skin tough to crack, spinning eyes from holding back the chill. Creeps in to bring the numbing of my empathy. I'm left with dread growing. My patience is wearing thin, my heart is pounding. Oh, but fate may see me gain my strength. Oh, I thought so hard. Started veins are pounding hard. So stay. Spinning out my self-contained. Trapped in rain. Gone in a flash, so trapped in so contained. Spinning out my self-contained. Lies they speak with ease, just to please their selfish needs. Lies they speak with ease, just to please their selfish needs. Still I fall for each, tangled in their
So that was the Vibrant Shadows and the video for Trapped, and we're back. So yeah, I like the video because it's I'm a bedroom producer, and I've been a bedroom producer before the pandemic, but I think that video kind of captures the life of a bedroom producer.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And it's pretty cool. I like you're showing you like you're on your like your MIDI controller, you're on your guitars, you're on your mic stand, and you're editing. You see you're editing, you're putting on your makeup, you're doing all this, working on like art for the video or art for your project, art for your music. And that's kind of like where everybody has to be right now compared to like, where we used to be touring. I think we spend more time on our craft, and the other parts, we've been able to do that more because the pandemic's kind of forced us to do that. But,
Yeah, and that part has definitely been fun.
Yeah, do you like the fact that you actually have more time to craft like your art compared to like typically a working musician? We spend more time touring because that's where we get the most money and we got to get our name out. But during the pandemic, it seems like most of the bands I've been talking to for the last year and a couple months, I've been spending more time like on their work, on their art.
Yeah, we've really liked getting to like spend more time like focusing on our music and our sound and just having fun making the art.
Yeah, I think that's a part of the process that a lot of times we don't have the luxury of doing that. We got a couple of weeks a year to go and record. The rest of the time, promotion and playing and all the other stuff that when you're doing it yourself. That's interesting. But let me get into the questions that I always ask bands. Like, when did you first get into music? At like what age?
We've both music since we were pretty little. My mom's a music teacher and always played piano.
Yeah, I started playing piano when I was 5.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've just always done music. And even as a little kid, I started writing songs. I always wanted to be a singer. So it's kind of just something that we've always done.
That's interesting. I think a lot of musicians, if I go back to, I started on a clarinet in a school band, and then I realized you can't really use a clarinet to write. So I got into piano, and then I said, well, piano's kind of boring. I like Elton John. I like Billy Joel, but it's like I started looking at people like Keith Emerson and the old Genesis, and I said, well, I need to get into synthesizers. So then I got, I'm a child of the 70s. And so I was like, listening to Pink Floyd and stuff. I'm like, oh, I need to get a synth. I need to go find. So I go to pawn shops and try to find synths. Got a band together, in the basement. And, it was just the birth MTV was coming. There's like 78, 79, and 80 comes along. And then we started seeing all these bands. And then my basement band, we're like, whoa, let's try to be like The Clash. Let's try to be like Duran Duran. Let's try to be like New Order. Let's try to be like Joy Division. And so like we were kind of in the middle of all that. And ever since then, I just kept on doing it. All the other guys got married and stuff. I kept on doing it. And here I am podcasting. And I used to love to listen to college radio. And it seems like to me the internet is the new college radio. And that's how I find bands like you, your band.
Yeah.
So like when you first got into music, who inspired you?
We've always been pretty fans of Paramore. I would say that Paramore was like my biggest influence, like growing up, like through middle school and stuff. I always loved Haley Williams.
Yeah, same for me, Paramore.
Is that the primary influence, or are there other like bands that you're into?
I would say probably three, but we're really influenced by like Halsey, Phantogram, it was BTS, Five Sauce, and Billie Eilish.
That's interesting. It's weird because like I said, I'm a child of the 70s and stuff, so I kind of go a little bit back. But one of the artists that I think you kind of sound like, I don't know if you've heard of them, Juliana Hatfield and the Blake Babies. They're like an indie alternative female led band, and then also I think a little Liz Phair, Sleater Kinney, that type of sound. And even if you go back, like, the Runaways were kind of like the inspiration for a lot of bands like L7 and stuff. But just like one of the things I like to do with this podcast is I tend to interview more female bands or female artists, just because I think a lot of women are doing the kind of stuff that was interesting to me back in the day. Back during the college radio time, you had bands like REM and Joy Divisions and the Duran Durans. They were doing really interesting things. But I find as more female artists are actually doing stuff that interests me as a listener.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just different, I think, today. I think it's because a lot of people have not given, I think, female artists the chance that I think they need to get. I think it is the kind of age of a female singer-songwriter.
Yeah.
So you guys, how have you handled like the lockdown? It looks like you guys are like a duo, so you're kind of like you're in like a pod and you're working, so you don't have to like worry about like, oh, how are we gonna put the band together? Like if you got a 4-piece band, which I don't know, maybe you have drummers and stuff, but like, is it harder for you guys to like put together your songs, or you have other members of the band that you can't get to?
No, it's kind of just us, and we live 2 minutes away from each other, so we're kind of always together.
Well, that's cool. Yeah. So you didn't have a problem where you couldn't like collaborate?
No, because it basically would have been if one of us had gotten COVID, the other one probably would have gotten COVID, so we probably would have been quarantining together.
Well, that's a good thing, because I was just dealing with some bands where like the drummers are having a hard time because they can't like if you have a physical drummer like in a rock band, right, and you're trying to, everybody can collaborate pretty easy through like your DAW, but the drummer tends to have a harder time doing that, and so it's hard for like drum bass, like a physical drum bands that still have physical drummers. We're having a hard time during the pandemic, and it was like a big issue. Even bands that had like horns, it's hard for them to like get the vibe without the rest of the band being in the same room, But it's been hard. But I think, like we said, like you guys, have you been able to be very productive during this whole time?
Yeah. We've been able to write more music since the lockdown. Because we can't really go anywhere, so it just gives us more time to like hang out at home and write.
Yeah, and then since like, because we're both in college, all of my like lectures and stuff are still online, which makes it nice because I was having to drive 40 minutes to go to school, and now I have that 40 minutes that I get to be at home, and then I don't have to worry about going places, so it gives us a little extra time.
Yeah, so a lot more times. Like like I'm a bedroom producer and I'm a remote worker. It's not a surprise. I'm in electronic music, so I'm into IT. Yeah. So before I used to have to fly somewhere, and then I'd only be able to come home on the weekend and work. Right now, I can just stay home the whole time. So like I'm in my bedroom, like so I have my work stuff, and then the other half of the room I have all my synths. So then I was like, it was like, okay, once I'm done, I don't got that 2-hour commute or 4-hour commute, and I can just go right into recording. So it's like,
that's kind of like I have my desk over there with all of my school stuff, and then like this is normally our music corner, and it has all of our music stuff set up. So
you got the same thing. I got the yin and yang. I got like half the rooms full of Moogs and half the rooms full of laptops. So it's interesting. So you guys, I see you're using like MIDI controllers, and I see you're using the DAW. So we get into the kind of production aspect. Were you always kind of like using the DAW and doing your own home studio? Did you go to recording studios? I know you had a band before you were in this band. Did you typically go to a recording studio with your band, or did you kind of do it yourself on like Ableton or Pro Tools or something?
With the other band, we would record a scratch track with the band. We didn't actually do any of that ourselves, and then we would take it to a studio, a home studio, someone that we knew. But then after we left that band and we started doing our own stuff, I had gotten into recording on my own because I'm in music production school now, And
Oh,
so
that's,
like I
that's a
was
good
starting,
thing.
yeah, I had gotten all the equipment and stuff, and so I was doing things, and then we just started doing it completely ourselves.
Do you like the freedom of not having a producer like reinterpret your work and be able to keep it closer to your original vision?
Yes, most of the time. Yeah. There are times where I'll feel stuck, and it would be nice to have like someone with the experience of a producer to like listen and say, well, you could do it this way and this could, sound better like this. But most of the time, yeah, we like having that freedom.
Yeah, because this seems like the age of like a lot of pop music. There's like 10 big producers, just to not be a
Yeah.
jerk.
Yeah.
And they tend to kind of clone and reclone their work.
Yeah.
And it works, but the question is, like, if you're a singer-songwriter, you're a creative type, right? Do you really want to sound like everything that guy's doing? Or
Right,
do you
yeah.
Not really.
or do you want to actually be able to have your own voice, because when I was growing up, listen to somebody like Liz Phair with Exile and Guyville. That was like a revelation because she was willing to do this lo-fi sound, very kind of punk inspired. And I've always been I'm a synthesist, but I love punk aesthetic. I like the Ramones, like the Runaways, like the Clash, the Sex Pistols, Replacements, like that, Husker Du, Black Flag. I was like listening to SST records, Sub Pop before Nirvana went big. I was just listening to everything Sub Pop had. And I was like, to me, that was like, that's what I like to hear because like it feels like there's a lot of honesty when you get a singer-songwriter, right? So you feel like you're listening to a story. It's like a sound picture or a sound painting, and you get to really feel what that artist is trying to say, And I'm kind of a person that grew up on albums, right? So I'm not a playlist type person. It's kind of new for me. When I go and get an artist, I want to listen to like just them. Is that hard for you today?
I do the same thing. I definitely am an album person. I will get obsessed with an album and listen to like just that album for so long until I get tired of it, and then I'll go find another one.
Is that hard as an artist today to realize that the way your audience listens is primarily on playlist and you're like part of this playlist and is having to get their attention by constantly having to put out stuff? Does that make it hard as an artist today to not be able to just focus on like projects like EPs and albums, unless that's what you do?
Yeah, sometimes we've been trying to like focus on things as like a single individually. So each song that we're writing, we want it to sound pretty distinct among the rest of them because of that, so that it stands out a little bit. But also, like, we want people to listen to our music, but we also, if we want to put out an album and put things in an album, we'll do that anyways.
That's cool. So is this song, the new song Trapped, is that part of a bigger project?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is that due for this year, or is it going to take longer? Or are you going to put it out as like an EP? What are your plans?
We're kind of at this point, we're hoping to put the songs from the album out like one at a time as a single, and then they'll be collective in one album.
So is that like more toward the end of the year or for like fall?
Yeah, probably more towards around like January.
Yeah, probably the beginning of next year, because I think there's 8 songs that we're working on for it. So we still have quite a bit to do, and then we have to get like the money to pay to get them mixed and stuff. So
yeah, that's always the rub. I think that's the big thing that people don't realize with musicians ever since Napster, right? Because I grew up having to go to Strawberry Record Store, right, or whatever record store was around, and buying a vinyl or buying a tape or buying a CD. I kind of went from vinyl to tape to CD to like vaporware. where it's like, okay, it doesn't exist anymore. But I do get frustrated when I watch my 21-year-old daughter giving like $20 tips to YouTube gamers.
Yeah.
and then not paying for music. And I'm kind of like, where did it that somebody playing a video game gets a $20 tip? Not that I'm against it, but it's
Yeah.
hard to get anybody to buy even 99-cent download
Yeah.
for a musician. I think people need to understand how much work musicians put into their craft between the time that they don't get paid for to craft it, right? The practice you have to do, the mixing you have to do, the mastering you have to do, the instruments you have to buy, the tools you have to buy, and then people just stream it for 30 seconds and say, "Oh, I'm going to the next thing."
Yeah. That is hard.
Yeah, that's something that we've talked about in some of my classes a lot, is that like it's become like expected for musicians to just put out music where you can access it for free or for really cheap and not pay for it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the only way that I've been able to, survive as an artist is that, I'm a podcaster.
Yeah.
My podcast, I get more income from my podcast than I do from my music. So my podcast helps my music because it gets people to go check me out. And then I get to collaborate with people. I get to do influence marketing. I get to do sync licensing. So if I go and I do something as you might not even know that I'm doing some like music on an ad or a TV show or a 30-second this and that because I don't have the ghost on it. But it's like, but the ghost is my passion. That's what I want to do. And all these other things fund it. But it seems like you have to do all this other stuff to do what you want.
Yes. Yeah.
Which really stinks. It's like you want to do the stuff that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
It's just difficult. And I guess without touring, it's been hard for bands primarily on our model. If you do a club, if I do a club in New York, I can get a pretty good payday, right? If I do a club in Boston or I go to Los Angeles or I go somewhere, I can get paid. I can sell merch, I can sell t-shirts, I can sell vinyl. Without that, you try to do these online concerts and stuff, and it's like difficult to make income unless you let you sell your t-shirt. Like you say, you sell your t-shirt, then you can make money, but the music you didn't really make the money. The t-shirt made the money.
Right.
Yeah.
So how have you guys, like, since you're going to school and stuff, have you guys got business courses or people coming up with ideas of what to do to fix this?
I'm actually in nursing school, so I'm not in a field anywhere near to music.
Okay, but you're in the engineering part though.
Yeah. We have to take a couple music business classes, but because I'm a production student, we don't go into like the marketing things or anything. It's just like basic, like if you get this big, you should probably get a manager and like a lawyer and this kind of stuff and how this works and how copyright works. We don't really talk about how to make much money on.
Well, what you're going to school for, you can actually do pretty good though, because that's actually how, like, a side gig. I'm doing a lot of production with, we're doing collabs with people. I'm doing something with this guy in Holland. I did something with this spoken word poet in Canada. You just end up working with people. And what I try to do with the podcast is this podcast becomes like a scene, right? It becomes a place where other musicians like find each other. And, since 2018, I've actually had artists I've interviewed who have watched another artist and then decided to go collab with them and go work on projects. And kind of just because I try to create this kind of community. So this is like Peg in itself, Van Electric Ghost is an idea to create a collective of musicians, not just electronic music musicians, but any genre. And to that degree, we're doing an online festival that we're inviting all of our guests to, like in July, from the 16th to the 17th. And we've got alternatives where we found some bands don't have the bandwidth to actually do it live. So they could give us an MP4 of a live performance and we can run it. And then maybe we could do a live little part where you introduce it live and then play it. So for bands who can't get that to work because they don't have the audio interface or they don't have the webcam that could do it, we have that option.
That's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we're inviting you if you didn't realize.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just so you guys, like I said, I've heard bands that remind me of you, like I think the Blake Babies were like Juliana Hatfield 3. you have a sound like kind of Sleater Keeney a little bit, but you're unique. You're not cloning them. You're just kind of in that space.
Yeah.
Which I don't understand. I mean, those are bands I grew up with, more in the
Mm-hmm.
90s, not as current as what you guys listen to, but I do hear a little bit of those bands in what you do.
Yeah. Okay.
So I guess you guys started like when you were 14 or 15. Like how did that happen?
So like I used to sing all the time, like in elementary school and stuff at talent shows. And then when I was 12, some friends and I did a local talent show in Shawnee, and we won. And so then from there, we just decided to like kind of stay as a band.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kept performing, and then we added Lauren.
When I was like 14,
Yeah.
my uncle was just like, "Hey, you should start playing guitar so that you can be in this band." And I was like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." So I taught myself how to play guitar, and then we started playing live shows and all around Shawnee.
So do you both play guitar?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Does one of you play bass and the other play guitar, or just two guitars?
I play bass. I play
Yeah.
bass better than guitar.
Oh, so you found that you tried guitar and then you found out you like the bass?
I played bass in jazz band in high school, and from there I liked playing bass. It just made more sense to me than guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Some people it's weird how some people pick up the bass and find that they are drawn to it more. Because I remember when
I don't know.
do you like the idea of like the rhythm, like part of it, or like there are some bass players that are very melodic, right? And there's some bass players that are more like locked in with the drummer. Are you kind of in between?
I would, probably in between. When I listen to music, usually the thing that I focus on the most is the bass line and the vocals. That's what I listen to. And so it's just easy for me to pick out the bass line and hear it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And some people like are music fans and they can't even tell the difference between a bass and a guitar. And you ask them like for the bass line, it's like, oh, what do you mean? But like if you're a musician, it's like you're listening to a record and it's like I'm a big Who fan, right? It's like John Entwistle to me is like one of the greatest bass players ever. And I just used to love the fact that he could play like a lead bass. If you listen to the Who, his bass lines are not typical of a bass player. They're actually very much like he's soloing through the whole song, even though he's staying in rhythm, but he's staying in rhythm with a guy like Keith Moon, who actually wasn't a traditional drummer either, because he was soloing through the whole song. Only Pete Townsend was actually keeping a rhythm with the rhythm guitar, which is an odd situation. Yeah, the Who is not a normal band in how you would like teach people how to be a band, because everybody's kind of going off as individuals and they're almost like they're falling apart all the time, but it works.
Yeah.
So it's not the best example to teach somebody like by listening to the Who. And that's where my band started. We listened to the Who first and everybody said, well, that's not the best place to start. but yeah, we're kind of like, well, we were contrarians anyway. So we want to be punk. So we don't care. We're going to do whatever we want. But is that like when it comes to like music, do you like that kind of idea of the punk aesthetic or the grunge aesthetic? Or that kind of indie sound, or what's your favorite type of music? Are you drawn to more pop punk or alternative, or maybe describe it?
I really like punk and grunge music. When we first started in Shoulda Been Blonde, we were more leaning towards like pop punk, and that was the kind of music that we were wanting to make. And I for a little while was into like metal. And then I kind of drifted more towards like the alternative rock music, and that's kind of where we've ended up is like alternative rock, alternative pop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because your stuff is poppy, but it's got this punk aesthetic. I can hear, like, that's why I say I hear this kind of Liz Phair or the Sleater Keeney. You hear this kind of punk aspect to it, like a Wild Flag. You kind of like, but it's it's cool to have that kind of hook. Because like you can be punk, but you can be so distorted nobody can hear the hook, nobody can hear the melody. But with your stuff, you can hear the hook, you can hear the melody. It's kind of got that '80s new wave feel, new romantic feel, which was like everything is kind of pop oriented, but you've got the little harder edge, which is cool. And I think that's always fun because I think like when you guys play live, does that carry over really good, that kind of punk aesthetic feel?
I think so. I think it's a little bit more prominent when we play live. You get to have a little more fun with like the vocals that way. I think so. It's fun.
So when you play live, do you just go with like using like an Ableton Live type of setup, and if you're a duo and you're running like your drums and stuff off the PC and like MIDI controllers, or do you actually get a real drummer or somebody to come play with you?
We will be doing that. We haven't gone to play a gig like just us, but we've played live a lot with our other band.
But for this, we'll probably track like the drums and things that we can't do while we're on stage. But we want to do as much of it live as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a one-person band, so my setup is kind of old school. I do something that Nine Inch Nails does. I actually use like Tascam and Zoom hardware recorders, and then mute and unmute tracks, and then play over them with hardware synths. So my whole setup is not PC based at all. It's all based on hardware recorders being muted and unmuted tracks, and then having like sequencers like Arturia, BeatStep Pros, and Moogs and Roland sequencers, hardware synths. Like I have nothing but analog and digital hardware synths, my own mixing board. So when I go to a place like New York, I got my own board that I control my mix from before it goes to the guy. And then I have all these foot pedals and controllers, and I basically do like a one-person show. But because I use a lot of analog drum machines, I use like Moog drum machines and stuff. So it has like a very organic feel, and I can use like random voltage and all kinds of LFOs and stuff to control my clips are being controlled through like subtractive synthesis. Instead of being controlled through like MIDI. So they sound a little more organic than normal. It gives you a different feel. And I just found that I could have done it the other way, but to me, it's more fun to kind of not do it with a DAW and see what I can do.
Yeah, when we do it, we'll probably we've used Ableton Live when we Twitch stream, and we run our tracks through there. But I think we'll probably use Logic.
Yeah, we might end up using Logic. We may I think we're gonna do some run throughs with both and see what works best for us.
Yeah, I've talked to bands that use both. You know, though it's kind of like 50-50. Some people are totally into Logic, some people are into Ableton, and then they got the rare bird like me that go out with just a bunch of modular stuff and do it off of clocks.
Yeah, it's just I haven't used Ableton like at all, so I don't really know how it works. But I use Logic quite a bit. Like at school, we use Logic and Pro Tools mostly, and so
it's probably better to go with what it's usually the way it is. Whatever you know best. Like because of Murphy's Law, if you do something live, it's better to do this thing you know the most, because like then you have less problems. That tends to be what it is. But I think it's cool that we're talking about going out and doing shows again, because you know, for the last year, most of the bands have, like we said, been able to just focus on art, you know. But now everybody wants to get back into performance. That's why I'm doing this, kind of creeping back into it, this live thing, festival. But we're hoping that one day, since we know some people in New York, that we know a record label in New York that we've actually had the person who owns it on the show. And we're hoping eventually that we can use some of the venues that they have access to actually do a physical version of our festival.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Hopefully by then people can travel easily from coast to coast. And in bands, because I want to create, like I said, this whole idea of having this collective of everybody I've talked to.
Yeah, that would be cool.
And then have a show where, you know, if I've had 60 guests in 2018, by the end of this year, I'll probably have 80. You know, right now we're thinking we can do maybe 20 people over 3 days. You know, and we can make that, you know, however long we do it with multiple stages, you can.
Yeah.
Kind of like, you know, like what happened with like, you know, Odd Future when they created their whole festival, Camp Flogna. Is like this idea that you take like control of your destiny by putting all these independent bands and running it yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what are you guys planning on on doing for like maybe live gigs? Are you do you have like stuff scheduled?
We don't have anything scheduled. As far as I know, like the places that we used to play locally, they're not really doing much live music still.
Yeah.
I don't
Still
think
kind
they're
of
getting many
tight.
crowds in
Yeah,
anyway.
it's still hard until we get like herd immunity.
Yeah.
Not that we
And
go that way.
then we really have to build like and figure out how we're gonna do our live show, like with all of the tracking and stuff, because that's all new territory for us. We really haven't ever performed with that. And so we're gonna have to figure that out. And then we're before like I just turned 21 in February. So like playing at bars was hard, but now we can like go and like try and watch music acts and try to get gigs that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's a cool thing. Yeah, playing live is. I think it's cool to do stuff on the net to kind of build up your capability.
Yeah.
Like one thing I've been doing since 2016, I basically have all these webcams and I do performances from my home studio, my bedroom studio, and I put on my ghost costume. It's like a LED hoodie and all this other stuff. But the whole idea though is if you do it live on Facebook or on Twitch or through like StreamYard, you get to see how that equipment works, right? You get to try out your act. And, if you mess up, you mess up, but you can always delete it.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's not like, we don't have that big of a following yet. So there's not a bunch of people watching. Yeah. So it's like, it's our space to mess up and do what we need to do in order to learn and grow to be able to play those live shows.
We have room to practice.
Yeah. It's just good to figure out how your sound interface actually kicks over, right? So you have your audio interface and then you go and listen to how it sounds on Twitch or listen to how it sounds on Facebook or YouTube and then say, oh, I have to make these adjustments because it's like not doing it right?
Yeah, and a lot of the times like we have our parents and our friends that will get on and watch, and so we have them like text us and tell us, hey, this needs to be louder, this needs to be softer. That way we can help balance it out that way.
Yeah, I think it's just a whole process because once you figure it out, I just started getting into green screens and I started getting into being able to like put into effects. My latest thing is to get video mixers that allow you to kind of do a round robin of cameras because I'm kind of serious about it. So there's they're like rolling video mixers that allow you to do a round robin. You can have like 4 cameras on, right? You can have one camera. Cool. You can have a video camera zoomed in on your guitar, right? Or zoomed in on your keyboard. And another camera, like a wide shot and other shots. And it will randomly bounce around those angles. And being a one-person band, that's good for me. But if you have multiple people running, you can actually physically run it manually.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and then when you can have HDMI level signals, stuff coming off your soundboard, and you can start introducing live effects into what you do. So you can overlay all kinds of iPhone-like effects in real time onto your performance. And the whole point of it is like, okay, if you want people to start paying for your live stream, you have to kind of do something a little extra to make it worthwhile. That's like, why would somebody want to buy that? Well, you got to do something that you wouldn't just normally be like unplugged or something. So eventually, instead of paying for the U-Haul to go to New York, I pay for the stuff to do online at home.
Yeah. I mean, we went out and bought. We have LED lights we can hang up now, and we got a fog machine just to like.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you get all the cool stuff you can get. Because you put the green screen up and you start running video. You do all kinds of stuff where you can like make you say you're in outer space or you're hovering over the Grand Canyon. You never know. You do something weird, but I just think it's cool that all these indie bands like yourselves are doing it yourself. You got you're running your own destiny, that you're taking charge of your career. And I think that's cool because, a lot of times when we get into music, we ask people like, well, why do you do it? Right. It's like, you do music, right? Because you love it, right? That's why you do it. Yeah. And then if the audience tends to find you, right? Like if you're passionate about what you do, I find that people will find you. Like your audience will like find you and say, whoa, that's cool. And not that you're trying to be somebody else, it's just trying to be the best you. Then some of the people find you, right?
Yeah, it's kind of just like putting your like most authentic self into like your music and what you're doing, and then your online presence, and just like trying to like vibe with people to get them to listen.
Yeah,
Mhm.
especially now, I think that's what people really want from musicians. They want you to be yourself and not be like something from the music industry. They
Yeah.
want you to be honest
Yeah,
in
and
who you are.
they don't necessarily want you to be like this person that they like look up to and like cherish. They want to see like how real you are and like the ways they can connect with you. It's not like they don't want that big divide. They want to see what you're like every day. That way they can relate to you better.
Yeah, that's why I think the kind of grunge thing came in. If you think about it, rock stars in the 70s got to the point where you're like, yes, they were great musicians, but they turned their back and were so into the music. Like they do these 20-minute things. And I'm a keyboardist, so I'm totally into what they did.
Yeah.
But I understand how that kind of like isolated the audience. And it's okay. These guys are virtuosos. I can never do what they're doing, right? It's like you listen to look at like a Robert Plant or Jimmy Page, like how you ever going to be like that, right? You're never going to match that, right? So then when you get bands like the Clash and the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and the Talking Heads and people, it's like, oh, I could actually do that. Maybe I could, and so I think what happens is then people say, well, I feel something. I want to be a musician, but I don't want to be so like classically trained that I can't even get there, right? That if I feel something, I can get there. And I think that's why people are drawn to like alternative indie grunge.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's still a place like I'm into jazz, so like I want to aspire to be like in Miles Davis group or something, or John Coltrane, and so I'll go stretch out my stuff with that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, can I play with you guys? But that's a different thing. You're doing that because you're trying to do something like to expand your capability.
Yeah.
And not everybody's going to be into that, but I think every musician has a kind of yin and yang of how far do you push it into stuff you're uncomfortable with, and how much do you stay in your comfort zone? What do you feel about that?
I really like to try to push myself outside of my comfort zone, especially when writing music, because I don't want all of them to sound the same. And I'll get bored like writing the same song structure or the same instrumentation. And I want to hear something different. I want to do something different. And so like I like to try a lot of different things. And sometimes it doesn't turn out good, and that's fine. Nobody has to hear it. But like just trying, like it helps me grow as a musician, and I think it makes the music that we put out better overall.
Yeah, I find this one thing I was asking artists, like when you try to like say, I'm going to write a song today, right? And you sit down and you try to like, I'm going to write it, right? I find that does not work for me. What tends to work for me is if have a happy accident. Like I turn on my Moog and suddenly my Moog starts doing something I didn't expect it to do. And then I say, oh, let me go with that, right? So it's kind of like if I was in a band and a drummer is just playing something and I come in, I'm like, ooh, what's that? And then that I tend to, most of my songs are because I heard something I didn't even know I was going to hear, or some of my synths started acting in a weird way and I kind of jumped on it. And anytime I tried to really plan it out, it ended up being too contrived and I didn't like it.
Yeah. I think ours is kind of both ways. Like we have one song that Peyton wrote, she had all the lyrics for, and then she's like, I want this to be a keyboard song. And so she already had all the lyrics for it, and then I sat down and started playing the piano and we figured that out. But then on the other side, there was one song where we just like, she had a guitar riff and we started with that guitar riff and then we got the lyrics from that. So
yeah, sometimes I'll just sit down and like go through all the synth sounds I have in my library and just play on the keyboard until I hear something and I'm like, oh, that gives me some kind of feeling. Let me kind of play around with that, and then if a song will come out of it.
Yeah, it's just weird because I think as you get older as a musician, like sometimes you unconsciously, like I've had some people say, hey, do you know you actually took this jazz like line off this like, The Only Monk record? And I didn't even know I did. right? It was in my head, and I just started doing it. And it's like, or I took something for some 50s soul song, and I subconsciously heard it and didn't realize that I heard it. And then I actually pulled that out of here. And you just never know like how your mind works as a musician. Sometimes you take all your influences and then you kind of put them in this kind of hodgepodge kind of thing. Is like, you know, like if you're like a chili or a soup or something, a gumbo of music.
Yeah.
It's like, it just comes out and you're like, wow, I didn't even know I was doing that.
Yeah.
But I think that's the fun in music. I think
Yeah,
one of the
sure.
things that I kind of like is not like letting things be. Like if I go and I do 5 takes or 10 takes, and then I go back and I find out that the first 2 takes are actually better, but there was an error in the vocal, or there's an error in the timing, but it was so much better that I was like, you know what, I'm going to live with the error and actually put that version out because that one's closer to the truth of what I wanted.
Yeah.
Do you find that you can do that, or do you like to make it perfect?
It really depends. So much of like putting out music, it's not just like being technically correct or like being like perfect with like on beat and stuff. It also has to do with like the performance. And sometimes we'll have like a take that it may not be completely perfect like in time, or there might be like a little mistake, but the performance is a lot better than the perfect take that we took earlier. And so we'll usually go with the one that just, because you're trying to convey emotions, not perfection.
That's what I think sometimes I hear in some production today, this level of perfection that's like so, it's actually not liberating, because like if you hear it, it's just so perfect that like my example when I hear it is I go listen to Keith Richards on Exile on Main Street. Listen to how he plays his guitar. If you try to track it, the BPM's all over the place, right? it's you can't get it perfect. It's very hard to play with Keith Richards if you try to play with him. If you try to, because he's not doing it exactly in time. It's kind of off. And it's like, that's kind of the genius of it, right? And so when you hear people like that and you're like, wow, it's like there's something about not trying to be perfect BPM, perfect pitch. There's a kind of honesty and feel in it. And that's why I like, you know, like Kurt Cobain. I like Nirvana, I like Joy Division. I like bands that are a little looser, like more lo-fi, because then they're allowed to stretch out and not be expected to have that sound. But I see that you guys are in the same thing, so that's cool. Not that everybody has to agree with me, but I think it's great that you guys are doing what you're doing. You came out of a different band, now you've got this project, and you're working toward like your first record, right? This will be your first full record. Yeah. I love to get bands when they're at this point. I've actually interviewed, like I said, up of like 60 bands. And I think it's really cool to see your growth, because what I tend to do is like 6 months from now or a year from now, I have people come on the show like multiple times. And I've had a couple bands that like were just coming out, and it's cool to actually see where you are 6 months or 12 months down the line. When you know, even 2 years down the line, I've been talking to people, and it's just, as a fan and a musician, I just like to see people grow. You know, it's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I will ask you to come on the program again when you're closer to that.
Oh, yeah,
We
no.
love that.
We would come again.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I think everybody should check out your single. We've got the link here. One thing we gotta let everybody know, we have been live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. We will send you all those links. They're going to be permanent. If you do have like somebody that controls your YouTube, sometimes we get companies, we get a strike and say, hey, you didn't have authority to play that. Just let them know that you gave us authority so they don't take it off the podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
The other thing is that we still produce our audio only version of this podcast. So within an hour, the Spotify and Apple and like 9 other platforms like Radio Public, Overcast, all these will eventually start to cascade on the net. And we will send you like the Spotify and Apple versions.
Okay, thank you. Awesome.
Yeah, so thank you for being on the program. We enjoyed it, and we will ask you to be on again.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. So I'm gonna go off right now. I'm gonna do a little bit of a pitch that we run ads at the end of these. So I'll take you off, but hope you guys have a good day.
Hope
Right,
you do
thank
too.
you
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you. This is Fam Electric Ghost, and we're going to run one of our sponsors right now because we like to, support the podcast. So we have a tendency to be able to promote the podcast. We have to sometimes bring in folks who help support us.
You check out wickedflannel.com. They are now a supporter of the podcast, and they have awesome flannel shirts and other gear. If you use the 15% off code Phantom Electric, again, the 15% off code Phantom Electric, you can check out their awesome Wicked Flannel. And we'd appreciate it if you do that because it helps keep this show free if you support the sponsors that we push as these ads on the show. So thank you very much, and we can continue to interview artists from around.